Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. Now, over 200 members of the Ministry of Public Administration recently came together in order to engage in sharing insight into a plan carded to transform the ministry. Now, Line Minister, Senator Allyson West, she joins us to discuss that and so much more. Greetings, Minister. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start off, though, asking about the role of the Ministry of Public Administration. Let's build this conversation from the ground up.
Hi, DK. Thank you for inviting me to your program. The Ministry of Public Admin essentially is responsible for ensuring that the public service functions properly and serves the public well. That is, in a nutshell, is what Ministry of Public Admin is. We are with other ministries, divisions, and agencies of the state to ensure that they are up to the task of fulfilling their mandates.
And someone introduced me to a term or a process, and is not necessarily the most complimentary, and is not with regard to the Ministry of Public Admin, but that what it described to me was a game of sending the fool further. So it's almost as though you go to one office for something and they say, no, it's not us doing that. You go there for that. And then you go and they send you right back where it is you came from. And are there any responsibilities or duties under your line ministry that people think they're supposed to be getting from that ministry but are not necessarily? So how do we separate some of those responsibilities? What are some of those distinctions?
Okay, so let me start with the first issue, which is really very critical and which I am passionate about trying to fix. I remember when I was at the Board of Inland Revenue, I was working there, and I was walking up the stairs from the footboard to the sixth floor, and I met this lady, and she was in tears. And the reason why she was in tears is because she came to the ministry to get assistance with her tax return. She was sent to Trinidad House. Trinidad House sent her to Queen and Edward Street, and then Queen and Edward Street sent her back. And this is so typical of what happens with ministries, because one, many of us don't know where to go to get the service that we need. And when we go to one ministry, we are told that we need something from another ministry, or that's the ministry that you need to go to. So we need to fix that. We need to ensure that when we offer a service to the public at a particular location, that the public does not have to be running all over the place to gather documents. And that's one of the things that digitalization of the public service should assist with, because each division is intended to have access to whatever information they need for that purpose. So you will not need in future, once it's properly implemented, to have somebody say to somebody, well, you need to go to the land registry to get a copy of your deed, or you need to go to the company registry to get a copy of your annual return, that kind of thing. Because the person is in front of you seeking a service from you, and if you need access to that information, you should be able to pull it up on your device, verify that it's related to this person and this service, and therefore be able to provide that service right away without having persons running around. So that's one of the things we're trying to do. It requires us to re-engineer processes in the public service and try and look at the government from a holistic perspective to determine what information is required for this. Is it really required, or is it already in the system? And how do we make life as easy as possible for citizens when they're seeking service from their government?
And what's the difference between having a new process, something that may be a little more proactive, intuitive, versus a paradigm shift? Because you can have the best intentions, and you can have a new system that is supposed to take so much work out of the process. But if the individuals who are in that system, they aren't up to the time, though the capacity hasn't been built, or sometimes it's just even a mindset, you might still feel as though you're spinning top in mud, Minister.
I agree with you. We do need a paradigm shift as part of this change, and we're doing a few things to try to achieve that. One of the projects that we are about to launch is a change management program by which we are going to be introducing to all the ministries, agencies, and divisions the new approach, the revised approach to serving the public. Because I think once it sinks in that we are about serving the public and not necessarily following rules, then people will start thinking differently and start trying to find ways to facilitate the requests that are in front of them. At the moment, we are there bound by rules which may or may not make sense, which may have been designed 3 decades ago that we have not realized. And we have forgotten that at the end of the day, our objective is to ensure that the citizens are served. So that paradigm shift is critical.
I mean, so you're talking about serving the public as opposed to following rules, and all I thinking is people going back to the car, getting curtain and draping it up on themselves fancy and coming back to organize. But as opposed to saying, okay, well, all right, this rule made headlines, so we're going to address that, and then something else goes viral, so we address that. How do we do it in a strategic way to address those gaps, those challenges?
That is what we're trying to do. We're not trying to put plasters on sores. We are looking at the whole picture, reassessing how ministries do what they do, and determining how these can best be restructured across the board to ensure that we service the public better. Because we really have to get back to the basic rationale for the public service being there. It is not to engage, it is not to engage people, it is not to employ people, it is there to serve the public. And if we're not doing that, then we're wasting time. So we have to get back to our original rationale for existence.
And it also begs the question of how the kind of ripple effects that we can have when there's ease of business is something that is spoken about in different conversations, but every process that helps with ease of business in an efficient and legal way, I think helps overall the movement of the country forward.
Exactly. And I mean, who does not want to work in an organization that is doing its job well, that is being recognized for being a progressive organization? So it really is to get the public servants out of the mindset of, well, they're stuck in this rut and people already think the worst of them, so why make an effort? Because there are a lot of public servants who are trying to do their best, and their reputation is tarnished by the performance of a few public servants who are not doing as well. And one of the problems that we have is that there is no accountability in the public service. There's no consequences for either good performance or bad performance. So that's one of the things we're trying to change. If, for example, the PSs who lead ministries are held accountable for the ministry performing or not performing, then we are more likely to see PSs inclined to pull up an errant officer who's not doing what they're supposed to do. If nothing happens, regardless of how you treat the member of the public, then there's no impetus for change.
And on that, I want to come back to that conversation, but I don't want to try to squeeze it in at this point in time. So let's take a break. We're speaking with the Minister of the Public Administration Ministry, Senator Allyson West. We return with more. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking with Senator Allyson West, Minister of Public Administration. And Minister, there's a point that you raised just before we took the break in terms of being punitively rewarded or being positively rewarded, and it's almost as though there's no carrot, there's no stick, you're just there. I think sometimes people may say, okay, well, I want to get a government work, I want to become a public servant because of that level of safety, for want of a better term. What are some of those things that you think we can take from the private sector? You just spoke about the PSs being responsible for total output on a consistent basis. Are there other things that you think we can pull, or you want to shift so that it resembles private sector a little more?
Well, there need, for example, in the private sector, there tends to be a set of KPIs, so key performance indicators that people are judged by, so that whether they stay in the job, whether they get promoted or demoted, whether they get a reward, whether they get a bonus, is all hinged on how they perform. In the public service, although this is not supposed to happen, as a general rule, people get promoted based on seniority. People get increments because they remain in jobs. It doesn't matter how they perform. And this is tied to the fact that the assessment system, the system by which public servants are assessed on their performance, although it exists in theory, does not really work in practice. If and to the extent that people comply with the rules of the assessment system, so they fill out their quarterly assessments and their annual assessments, even when they do, the vast majority of them tend to be middle range assessments. So whether you're performing as an excellent A employee or whether you're down at the bottom of the line, everybody gets satisfactory, satisfactory, satisfactory. And therefore, when it comes to promotion, there's no basis for the people seeking to promote you to differentiate one from the other than how long you have been in the job. Which is why the people who get promoted are the people who stay in the public service the longest, and those don't necessarily tend to be the right people. So one of the things we're trying to do sooner rather than later, and we're starting the process with the more senior officers, the PSs and so on, is to introduce and implement a proper assessment system so that when people are performing well, they get the promotion. When they're not performing well, they do not. They do not get an increment. So that is what we're trying. So there is a carrot and a stick that goes with the way you perform, and that should propel people to put more effort into what they do and how they do it. Another thing that we are seeking to introduce is reporting process whereby the members of the public indicate how they view a particular service. And that is linked to an individual so that we know what needs to be done to improve the service and we know what needs to be done in respect of how the individual has performed. So the individual is not only being assessed by the supervisor, but also by the members of the public.
But that raises two questions, though, Minister. Normally, well, I've seen boxes in different spaces. How was our service? So you fill it out and you put it there. You don't know if you open it, you find pieces of paper and cobweb. We don't know. But at the same time, I'm thinking how easy is it for someone to, I don't like that person, so I'm going to do a review that is a little less than ideal. And so there's that. Is there anything in place to kind of mitigate against that? I don't know if I'm feeling a little jaded in terms of saying, okay, well, how do we deal with that? And also, I'm looking at the fact that how are you looking to implement this new assessment service? Because sometimes the first set of individuals to go under the spotlight with a new sort of methodology like that, sometimes say, okay, well, can I be victimized? What is happening here? Is this an industrial relations issue? So are these things that have cropped up? And if so, how are you dealing with them?
Okay, so in terms of industrial relations issue, all the changes we are seeking to make, we will engage at the appropriate time the trade unions, the representatives, to discuss how we are treating with this and how it will impact on the employees. In terms of victimization, if one gets one bad assessment from one member of the public, that would not be a good basis on which to base somebody's overall assessment. But if somebody is working, let's say, at a counter over the course of a year, then one would expect to see a true picture building based on the many feedbacks we would receive from members of the public that that person would have served. So it's on the basis of the overall picture that we get from the feedback that we will determine how that person should be categorized and how that person should be rewarded or otherwise.
Thank you
And
so much.
what we are planning to do is introduce an electronic system so there's not a cardboard box with paper gathering cobweb, and we are going to have a back room that will assess the feedback and provide reports so that those reports can be actioned by the different ministries.
So glad to hear that. But in the 3 minutes that we have remaining, Minister, looking at those key performance indicators, some people like to see what works, some people like output. Tell us a little bit about work from home or remote work, please, and work that is going into possibly making this something that is a lot more commonplace than it may be right now.
Okay, so we just came out of a strategic planning session at the Ministry of Public Admin, and work from home is one of the many things we discussed as to how we improve the work of the ministry itself, and through that, how we improve the functioning of the public service. Work from home is very topical, having been exposed to the benefits or otherwise of work from home during the COVID lockdown. There are a lot of public servants who are anxious to get back to that. But we have to be careful how we proceed, because we have to ensure that as and when we implement a formal work from home system, it doesn't compromise the level of service that is provided to the public, because we are not seeking to provide services less efficiently. We're trying to get more and more efficient. So we have to ensure that the hardware is there, software is there, that the workflows are in place, that proper supervision is there, so that we can efficiently monitor the performance of people who are working from home. We also have to identify who can work from home and who cannot, because some jobs will not allow for working from home. We have to have discussion with the trade union representatives in terms of that discrepancy between who can and who cannot. And once we come up with a proper system, then we will implement it. One of the things that this will require is public servants who are continuing, some of them, to resist the adoption of technology. It will force them to reconsider that position, because you cannot properly work from home unless you embrace the technology, so you have access to the information that you need, and you can easily communicate with both the clientele and your colleagues.
Thank you so much. And 15 seconds, Minister, do we have any timelines that we can be looking for rollout of certain things?
Yes, we are hoping to do the feedback this year. The change management is starting no later than the end of November. And we have already started process reengineering in certain ministries. So that is work that is ongoing, that we will be pushing, while the Ministry of Digital Transformation assists the ministries with the digital aspect of what they're doing.
Thank you so much, Senator Allyson West, Minister of Public Administration. And just finish that thought for me, thank you.
And no, I was just going to say, my objective is to do as much as we can, as soon as we can, so that the change gets ingrained, so that with a change of minister or a change of administration, the gains will not be lost, because that is what tends to happen. We tend to have an ebb and flow. So I'm trying to push implementation as early as possible, so it becomes part of who we are, part of the DNA.
All right, thank you so much for that update on the works of the Public Administration Ministry. Senator Allyson West, Minister of Public Administration. This has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. On behalf of the entire team, thank you so much for joining us.